On May 8th, 2025, something unprecedented happened in the world of American libraries. Donald Trump abruptly fired Dr. Carla Hayden, the Librarian of Congress. The leader of the largest library system in the world, removed by executive action almost a full year before her tenure term was to end. So the question is why? Hi, I'm Allison from the Library of Democracy, and we're going to be talking about the firing of Dr. Carla Hayden, now the former Librarian of Congress. The White House did issue a short, very cold statement saying that the firing was immediate, no formal hearing, no warning, just an email. The official reason is same as it always is. They accused her of having divisive DEI practices and the presence of allegedly inappropriate children's books in the children's collection. According to the press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, he was acting well within his authority. But even members of Congress, who we'll get to in a minute, didn't ask for her to be removed. Library associations, they're all really calling it out for what it is. It's a political retaliation, and it really is just an attack on information, literacy, and knowledge. And for the record, the Library of Congress does not check out books to kids anyway. We'll get into some of the functions of the Library of Congress in just a minute. So, who was Carla Hayden? Well, she wasn't just another DEI hire or bureaucrat. She is actually a really groundbreaking figure in American history and within the history of the Library of Congress. Appointed by President Obama and confirmed by the Senate in 2016, Hayden was the first female and the first African American to lead the Library of Congress. And just as importantly, she was the first actual librarian with a library science degree to hold the post in over 40 years. At the Library of Congress, she worked to modernize the systems, expand digital access, and highlight collections and stories from marginalized communities. She worked really hard to expand the StoryCorps, which is a program that is funded by a whole bunch of different nonprofit organizations, including grants from the Library of Congress, which went to communities to find stories from everyday people to include the collection based on a whole bunch of different topics. They did a lot on segregation, civil rights. They also talked about Depression era, those kinds of topics. So it was really trying to bring the people into the library that is really meant for the people. Now, following her firing, Robert Newlen, her deputy director, has stepped in as acting Librarian of Congress. There's no word yet on whether he'll be permanent or if Trump is eyeing somebody more aligned with his agenda, but Newlen has been a longtime staff member of the library. Now, Robert Newlen isn't a bad pick to be the interim Librarian of Congress. He's actually served as the Deputy Librarian of Congress for many years. He also served as the Congressional Research Service director for several years as well. The Congressional Research Service is a division of the Library of Congress. And basically, whenever there is a hearing, those committee hearings that you'll see on C-SPAN or even sometimes on the mainstream networks, they often talk about topics that these members of Congress know very little about or nothing about at all. Or if there's a new bill on legislation, what they'll do is they'll ask the Congressional Research Service to put together a short report on the topic. And the topics can range from literally anything. They're all publicly available and they're really, really helpful in explaining really complex issues, especially issues that have a complicated past. So I recommend if you're ever looking to learn the history of net neutrality, for example, I actually had to learn that once. And if you research it piecemeal on your own, it's really difficult to really see the timeline of events. But the Congressional Research Service put together a fairly short, probably about 12 pages of the timeline of net neutrality from 20 years ago up until now, the executive orders between presidents that have changed the laws of net neutrality. Anyway, that's just an example of something that you can find. And when Congress was talking about it, I think it was in 2017 when Trump repealed net neutrality again in his first term. They formulated a report on the topic because it's so complicated and there were so many changes. So it was really helpful to me to really understand the legality and the progression of that topic. So you can literally find tons of different topics. They're really handy for uh, academic research, your own personal, you want to know something, and they're easily available online. So let's get back to Congress's role in everything. An article published in Politico on Friday stated that members of Congress had not requested Dr. Hayden's removal. Members on key congressional committees with jurisdiction over the massive library who questioned Hayden at hearings in recent weeks did not encourage the White House to remove her, the people said. In some cases, they themselves found out about Hayden's removal Thursday through news reports and third parties. This is from a Politico report. Also mentioned in that same Politico article are some comments from the employees. I'll read directly just a few lines from the article. Quote, employees at the library are reeling after the sudden removal of Hayden. Three employees who were granted anonymity due to fear of retribution said they are concerned about the potential purge of the library's vast collections. And this is important, as I mentioned, that I'd go over a little bit of the purpose of Library of Congress. It goes on to describe the Library of Congress holds more than 178.2 million items, including more than 25.77 million books. Under federal law, U.S. publishers of books, periodicals, and more are required to submit copies of all published works to the library for review and possible acquisition. One of the purposes of the Library of Congress isn't just to serve as a library to Congress, literally, but it was also to serve as almost like the nation's memory. So, as I just read, they seek to collect as much of the nation's most important, and by important, it's not necessarily who wrote it, it's really what the work, whether it's a book, periodical, is covering and the significance and contribution it makes to society. So, kind of gives you a little more context as to why all of a sudden Trump might take some interest in the Librarian of Congress.